Chapter 9, Section 3, Political Parties. Hello, Mount Pleasant, and welcome to another installment of your lessons. Today we will be examining the political party process, and by the time we are done, you should be able to answer these questions. 1. What are political parties, and what role do they play in the political process? 2. How does the American two-party political system work? 3. How are political parties organized? And lastly, you will be able to answer the question, do political parties serve the public good? Have you ever thought about why we have political parties? If we go back to the beginning of the year, I spoke about the need for social interaction and the need to belong to groups. And political parties have given people a sense of purpose. However, George Washington urged our founding fathers upon his farewell address to avoid political factions and be one large cohesive unit, warning the people that political factions may seek to obstruct the execution of the laws created by the government or to prevent the branches of government from exercising the power provided them by the Constitution. But political parties have flourished since Thomas Jefferson and are considered the foundation of our country that has led to the stability of democracy for the past 200 years, lending itself to nominate, elect, and monitor what our representatives do on a daily basis. Whether it's the mayor of Mount Pleasant or the president of the United States, political parties attempt to influence our daily lives. Looking at the slide here, you will see I have listed party ideology. These are the basic set of ideas and goals that unite a political party. With the main two parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, not everyone is aligned on all ideas and goals, but typically put themselves where the majority of the beliefs lie. This alignment is known as the political spectrum, or the continuum of social and political beliefs that stretches from conservatives on the right to the liberals sided left. We recognize that there are three main roles of a political party. The first is to nominate candidates for political office. Secondly, to assist the electoral process. And last, to help operate the government. The nomination process is straightforward. We put the best candidates forward to run for office. Most candidates have their own views, but if they want to get elected, they'll adopt their party's platform. In return, the party will fund the campaign of its candidates, which, if you're looking at the national level, can be very important. In addition to nominating candidates, political parties aid the electoral process in the following ways. First, they educate people on issues. Second, it gives candidates a brand name. Think of Trump and Biden. What do those names conjure up? That is brand name. Third, political parties register voters and keep them informed, which is essential to having citizens make better decisions. Lastly, the parties act as watchdogs to make sure their supported candidates are doing enough for the party and their constituents. This all culminates in each of the parties controlling and running our government and country. Unless you've taken an honors course in government, then you may not know our political parties have a storied and not so long history. What started out as the Federalist and Democratic Republicans is now primarily the Democrats and Republicans. The true term Democrat was born under the Andrew Jackson era in 1824, and our Republican Party was founded in 1854. At some point in the history of modern presidents, and modern being from Teddy Roosevelt on, both party ideologies switched. What was once stood for Democrats is now what stands for Republicans, and of course, the vice versa is true too. So the basic party systems around the world include a one party system in which a single political party controls the government. Other parties may exist, but they yield little to no power. The two party system competes to control government and rarely holds power in all the branches. Of course, I'm talking about what we have here in the United States. Yes, we have dozens of smaller parties, but those parties are usually predicated on single issues like the larger two parties. Last is the multi party system, in which several parties compete for control of the country's government. And this is the most common type of government around the world and would be found primarily in Italy and as well as India. Now, if we go back to the original parties that formed, you had two factions that formed those that subscribed to Jefferson and his agrarian society, in which he wanted all Americans to be farmers and follow the Constitution strictly. They were the ones that were known as Democratic Republicans. Then you had Hamilton. Now, remember, Hamilton and Jefferson, They go back in history because if you go back to the anti-federalist Federalist Papers, these are the two groups that fought to instill a constitution and a change in government. So the hatred runs deep here. Anyhow, Hamilton's plan of having a strong central government that consisted of large cities and a strong manufacturing base was loosely interpreted constitutional values. They were the ones known as Federalists. Now, bump yourself up to 1824 after Andrew Jackson's defeat in what would become known as the corrupt bargain. Of course, that term is loosely used because it's used for a couple other presidents. The Democratic Republicans split into the Democrats, and in 1854, the Republican Party emerged. And of course, we know that within 6 years, they're going to have their first president in Abraham Lincoln. Now, third party groups can affect elections too. And third party groups are smaller factions that represent smaller ideals, not so much broad like the two major parties do in our country. But such is the case in 2000 when Ralph Nader won Florida. And by winning Florida, he cost Al Gore the presidency, which of course led to George Bush winning. And many opt to believe that independent voters, and keep in mind, if you're an independent or claim to be an independent, you cannot vote in any of our primary elections. You can only vote in the actual elections in the fall. This is decided when you register to vote. So when you go to vote, um, when you register to vote, you're choosing a political party. Now you can do this also when you get your driver's license. And you can declare it, you can change it there as well. But once you register to vote, you can always change your party's affiliation. But the closer you get to an election, the window closes. I think about 3 weeks early from that. Now that you know our political parties, and quite frankly, by this point you already did know them, at least the two major parties, we're going to take a look now at how each level of party organization affects the success of the party. At the local level, the structure of political parties are different, and this can be due to the state laws or organization of each party. A county chairman helps select candidates for local offices, and we saw this after the passing of State Representative Mike Reese when his position had to be filled. There were at least five interested people, and that party had to narrow it down to one candidate. And I believe they chose, if I'm not mistaken, the woman who had the what became known as the Trump House in Unity Township. Local elections are done through precincts, which it's the smallest organization for any local voting. When you group those together in a city, then that becomes what's known as a ward. So you may vote in the sixth ward, but belong to the second precinct. And any indication that a ward may include several precincts in an area, that's how you define it. So, example from where I live in Pittsburgh, um, we don't have wards, um, but our precincts make up. Oh, shoot, there's. I want to say there's at least 15 precincts where I live, and so I have to know which precinct to go to. Anyhow, the state party is run by a central committee, which is made up of of representative members of county committees. And the county committees, they appoint a chairperson to run the daily operations of the party, and it's tasked with getting their candidates into office, especially the president of the United States. And finally, we have the national party of each major party, and they too have a chairperson that leads a large staff and manages its operations. We spoke of this when we did chapter 12 and completed the organizational chart, and we went through each of the functions of those people. Well, these people are unique because they get paid to do their job, where most other ones are volunteer. Other than getting their person elected to the presidency, they work with sponsor affiliated organizations such as the National Federation of Republican Women and the College of Democrats of America. There are more, but I think you get the idea. Each party is represented some way in some form. Now, for all the hype and criticism of politics, it can do good for those of us in the public. When parties gain strength and stability, things get done. But remember, not everyone is in agreement with what gets done. So parties must keep the minority happy by passing resolutions that will ensure an even balance between the majority and minority. Even if a measure or two gets passed that supports the minority, people in the majority rarely jump parties because of this, opting instead to voice their opposition and focus on what they can get done. Parties have also been in big by gaining support in large majorities or groups, such as unions who typically vote Democrat or big business who vote Republican. You can pretty much judge a group's affiliation based on their occupation, and this is, of course, known as the brand name politics. The biggest criticism of big party politics is that it fails to make good on all the promises. Think back to this past election. President Biden promised stimulus checks for $2,000 as soon as he got into office. Well, he also promised to forgive $50,000 in student loans, and neither of those two things happened. But what did happen was that he eliminated 70,000 oil industry jobs that he said he would protect, but he didn't. So the big political business doesn't affect everyone on all issues, but people do get disgruntled, and they'll muddle along, hoping that their party does do them some good. But you can see why people will be quick to turn and choose a new candidate in the future if this is what their candidate promises and then does the opposite. And to finish up, the last thing I'll say is that some office seekers are looking for individual glory on the political stage, and they'll often leave the smaller people behind. With that, have a great day, Mount Pleasant.